Welcome to the latest episode of the Undiscovered Metric with me, JJ Haig. Today I'm joined by Johannes Höller, Head of Data Consulting and Solutions at diva-e, to discuss how clients can find the single source of truth in their data, key metrics to improve marketing performance, and some of the common pitfalls that marketers face when trying to improve their marketing reporting. Johannes, thank you so much for joining me today. Just before we get started, please could you just share with our listeners a little bit of a background into your career and your role at diva-e?
Yeah, sure. Hi, JJ. So first of all, thank you for having me in your podcast today. It's an honor. I'm really happy to be here. And yeah, of course, as you said, I'm Johannes. I'm at diva-e. I'm responsible for the business unit, data consulting and solutions. What we do at diva-e is we help our customers to create high-end digital experiences with the goal to improve customer interaction and, of course, the business success at the end. Few words to my history. After studying business informatics, I went straight into the world of online marketing, and through all that classic paid advertising, like for instance, Google Ads and stuff like this, I immediately came into contact with lots of data, and of course also the challenges of managing and using all this data. It's not that easy, especially like 20 years ago when I started, it was quite hard. Meanwhile, I've been working with data and tools now for over 15 years, almost 20. It's horrible thinking about that. But still try to make my daily life, but of course also this from our customers day by day easier, helping them to manage data, say it in general.
And we sound like your experience is really going to help out a lot of our listeners when we get into the full conversation. Just before we get into the nuts and bolts of metrics, reporting, dashboards, can you give us a little bit of insight into some of the traps that people fall into when coming to you for help to start that process of building sort of key marketing reporting with data?
Yeah, sure. Well, there would be quite a lot, maybe not enough time today to talk about all of them. So maybe let's try to point out maybe some of the most common challenges we always experience again and again within our diva-e projects and with our clients. I would like to start with the first one, maybe my favorite one, to be honest. It's about complex visualizations. Quite often, not only sometimes, it's way easier or simpler visuals can be way more impactful than complex ones. So my advice definitely would be keep fancy charts and graphs to a minimum level at any time and always have the purpose, the real purpose of the report in mind. And of course, the same applies to the number of reports and dashboards. Not necessarily more is better in this case. That's a clear learning I personally, and we have in almost any projects. Next one could be no or less requirements available at the beginning. All those reports or dashboards at the end should be somehow tailored to the specific needs of our users, and without understanding their needs and the user's perspective, it's quite hard and difficult to create a useful report. I can build anything, of course, but if I'm not aware of what's really required, I will fail, very likely. Lack of consistency. Quite often reports we see when we take over projects have totally different look and feel. So everybody tries to build his reports, making some blue buttons there, some green buttons there and stuff like this, but it's not consistent. For us, a consistent reporting also in terms of like look and feel is very important to get the awareness and the engagement of all users working with this report throughout the company. The company usually has a CI. Reporting and dashboarding should follow this CI actually. Quite big problem is data quality, especially bad data quality. Dashboards are only as good as the data they are based on. Well, that's nothing I invented, but it's very true actually. And I quite often experience the difference. That's why I want to point out this point. It's so important to ensure that data is accurate, complete, and relevant. It sounds easy, but in reality, it's not that easy. It's one of very common pitfalls. And last but not least, I would say, when we try to build reports, we try to tell a story. Quite often, this is not the case. So there is a missing story. There are some random visuals or graphs somewhere. There is no structure, nothing. And this makes it very hard for users, especially the ones not so experienced or not so deep in the area of what it's about, to understand those reports or to work with them. So they should have like a best case self-explaining story, and the structure of the dashboards, style and whatever follows this story somehow.
And just to get you to expand a little bit on that missing story, and this is something that's come up quite a lot actually in our podcast, is aligning that data story with your core business KPIs. Is that something that people aren't doing enough of, or they're trying to run a little bit before they can walk, or is it a combination of both that provides the data story that they want to tell to others that are not working within that sort of day-to-day?
I would say it's like a combination of both. What we experience very often is that people are telling stories, but very different stories. So like the management is telling different stories, and like the marketing manager is telling a totally different stories, but both are looking at the same report. So this cannot happen actually. So it needs to be aligned. It should be the same story because it's the same data. Of course, it's a different perspective, but it has to be the same story. At the end, there are always like decisions or any other measurements based on any reporting, and it cannot be that everybody has like a different outcome at the end. So it makes no sense at all. And we try to, of course, align these stories which are present throughout the different roles.
And I think that's something that people can definitely take away is set that story before they're sort of looking at it from totally different areas.
Absolutely.
Obviously, all projects and client requests are different, but what are the sort of common things and common metrics that everyone should be focusing on when it comes to their marketing reporting? Are there sort of 4 or 5 or a few more that you would really highlight?
Well, the most relevant ones quite often depend on the specific goals or the objectives of the campaign itself. So it's not always the same. A basic thing to point out before is like, I always advise that clients should very work closely with their marketing team to identify beforehand, before the campaign starts, what the campaign is about and which metrics might fit best to, at the end, measure success of the campaign. The most common ones are, no surprises here probably, very at the beginning are the traffic sources. Campaigns nowadays are running on so many different channels, from social to paid, if organic and whatever. So having your traffic sources under control, or meaning understanding where your website traffic is coming from, is still a very powerful insight. And at the end, it's your basic for any other analysis and any other KPIs you're looking on. You need to see where your traffic comes from. Of course, you have those very common metrics like the click-through rate or the cost per acquisition, or of course the conversion rate at the end when it comes to transaction, which should be always included somehow in a basic set of a report or dashboards. What we see more and more is everything around engagement metrics. For instance, how many time the user spend on the page, what the bounce rate is, or any other engagement signs and signals, because this gives you an indication how the user really interacts with your content, with your website. And you can gain a lot of interesting insights to optimize maybe your landing page or even your campaign, how to impress the user, by just looking on those engagement metrics. Of course, everybody does somehow social advertising or has a social presence. All those social media metrics like shares and comments or likes or whatever the different platforms provide should be considered as well. And at some point, finally, you need to measure also, the profit or generated from this campaign. So the ROI, of course, it should be at some point included. Nothing without ROI. The interesting or the challenge is to combine those stuff. So it's not enough to look at one of those metrics. You need to combine them and make the right decisions based on the combination of the different ones.
I was just going to ask you on that combining of all of them, and also demonstrating ROI has always been a challenge in the marketing industry. There's sort of anything off the top of your head that would really help, or anything that you see that actually not necessarily solves the case, but can sort of people can take away and think, oh, actually, that's a good way of approaching how to demonstrate ROI.
We usually try to have an approach like, let's say like an MVP approach sometimes, doing a either try to simulate a campaign or something, or do at least in a very narrow or gated area to run a campaign or part of the campaign to test it. Then use this database you generate by this and try then to simulate the overall campaign. But it will never be like that the match at the end will be 100% exactly, but nobody expects that, to be honest. So we have some flexibility here, but this can help to give an indication.
Going back to all those metrics that you've just identified, now that a client's looking at all those metrics, they combine them, as you said, how can they use these to not only generate that single source of truth, but then go on to sort of improve their marketing performance?
Well, first of all, it's necessary to view each optimization not as a one-off action, like a single action, but as an ongoing process, always in combination. So especially also with our clients, we usually discuss like 5 to 6 different steps. So maybe let me guide you through those different steps, what are best practice for us. First one is identify areas of improvement. So use the data you have to identify single areas where you really can, or where you think you can improve the performance, where the performance is lacking, or where you have any indication that some changes are necessary. It can help to look, for instance, for patterns or for trends in the data to identify those areas. Not always it's quite obvious. Sometimes it needs a second or a third or even more looks to identify those areas. Once done, set goals and targets. So this is maybe my personal most important one. Once you have identified areas you can improve something, you need specific goals or targets you work on towards those actions. Without having those targets, whatever you will change at the end, and no matter how well you will monitor the progress, you will have no idea if it works or not, and if you're satisfied or not, because you never set the target. So what do you want to reach? Do I want to increase my conversion rate by 2% or by 10? And always consider, why do you want to have this increase in a certain amount of percentage? And that's why goals and targets are so important from my personal perspective. I just mentioned monitor progress. Of course, whenever you change something, even if there are small things, make sure that tracking and monitoring is working and that you can really identify any result caused by any change you did. So it also makes no sense to change a lot of stuff and then have no idea which change was responsible for this impact, because maybe you can use those insights for other campaigns at a different time again, but that requires that you really have an idea which change has which impact on my goals and targets I set before. Only doing this, it enables you to make at the end so-called data-driven decisions, but that's why we're doing all this stuff, actually, to use this data to make the right decisions or the most likely right decisions. And it can also help to share my data within the company with the different stakeholders. It makes a difference if I talk to the marketing colleague or to the BI specialist or to the data scientist. The data is most likely the same basis, but I need to talk to them and share my data and my insights and discuss it with others to get even more, hopefully, useful insights on what I have. And of course, use the data and compare it with others, especially with data you maybe get from competitors, from the market, using benchmarks, because not only from your own view, it's important to evaluate the data. Of course, you want to know, is my conversion rate, for instance, good or not compared to my top 3 competitors on the market? That's something, of course, what interests me and makes me able to know, am I doing a good job or not?
And can that comparison of data help then inform setting the goals for the next campaign that you run?
Of course, absolutely. So if I see like I have my top 3 competitors to take this example again, and my numbers are way below all of them. Of course, I should somehow set targets and afterwards actions to maybe come into this top 3 area, because, well, the ambition should be to be number 1. But if there is a long way to go, maybe it needs some steps to do it step by step. And yes, this data will definitely help me to set goals, or especially realistic goals.
That word realistic is probably the most important thing that sometimes people forget.
It is.
Because I think a lot of those are interlinked in terms of you can do them at the beginning, you can do them in the middle, and then obviously do them at the end of campaigns. If you're monitoring progress on a daily basis, you can tweak and change your goals somewhat if you can see that the campaign's not landing in the same way or all of that. And I think it's really important, as you say, to sort of monitor that progress, identify areas of improvement, not only just at the end when we're looking retrospectively, but looking all the way through.
And of course, it's a life cycle. Just to mention that it doesn't stop once you run through them once. Of course, it happens again and again, and that's also a must-have.
On that, once you're looking at the data and going back slightly to the metrics side of things, do you think that there are any metrics that customers and clients aren't looking at enough, or there's data out there that people just sort of disregard but shouldn't be?
Well, absolutely, yes. I'm pretty sure there are a lot of metrics which are maybe not considered enough. Well, every customer case for us is quite different. Let me think. I can bring up maybe one or two examples which we see quite often, or more often than we want to. First one is scroll depth, actually. It's an often underestimated, but our experience also wrongly used KPI. So if the user scrolls down briefly and quite fast and then up again, he has already been triggered 100% scroll depth, for instance. But if this happens within 2 seconds, everybody knows how we are using websites sometimes. No chance that the user has seen your page or even your content properly. You cannot tell me that. That's not possible at all. And that's why and that's something what we see quite often. We see a setup where this is set up, and then everybody's wondering, oh, we have very good scroll rates. Everybody's scrolling down to the bottom, but all the interaction rates and engagement metrics I mentioned before are crap. So they are like way beyond any targets we set before. So that's why we always try to include a second KPI, like time on page, for instance. And when it comes to building a report or a dashboard, those KPIs are always put together, because only in combination you can really make a decision or evaluate what the user did. If you have great scroll depth rates, but very, very low time on page, probably nobody reads the content on your page, and there is no interaction. If you have very long time on page and still great scroll depth rates, quite better indicator already. And that's what you can use to, of course, optimize your landing page, for instance. Also for very small pages, mobile optimized pages, it sometimes makes no sense to use scroll depth as a key indicator, because if like 75 or maybe 80% of your content is seen above the fold, there won't be any indication using scroll depth, for instance. And that's what we see quite often, actually. That's why I'm bringing up this example. Maybe another one is it's not a KPI, it's more a setting in analytics tools, but it results in wrong KPIs or bad KPIs, is the referral exclusion list, which is quite often simply forgotten to be set up correctly. What does this mean? For example, I have PayPal or any other payment service provider, and this is linked during my checkout. And then the user returns to the actual website. If this is not set up correctly, the actual source where the user was originally coming from is just overwritten by referral. And I'm losing this important information from which traffic source my user originally came from. So any analysis in terms of website traffic or channels will have incorrect results immediately. And it's a small and easy setting to take, but it's one of those low-hanging fruits we see in every second audit we are doing for clients at the beginning.
It sounds like it's something that will, once it's done correctly, marketers will really see quick impact in that data and go,
oh, what happens? Magic, yeah.
And then just taking that a little bit further, are there any sort of tips that you have, or one key tip and takeaway for anyone that's trying to sort of build out their data strategy and marketing reporting when they're trying to understand their metrics and data better?
Well, partly I would say I mentioned some of my key tip already. It's in one word, I would say it's focus. I know it sounds very simple, but reality often looks very different. I brought up some examples already, what we experience day by day, and people are very quickly very tempted to build reports for anything. I made the same mistakes in earlier times, to be honest. It's so cool to drag and drop visuals, graphs, and making another page and another page and another page. And at the end, most of that stuff is rarely or even never used or has no added value. It looks nice, fancy, but you will never work with it. So I would say only build what is really used. Less is more. Consider the requirements and stick to the requirements the users have.
And does that come from setting out a strong data story at the beginning before you start this sort of marketing reporting process?
Yeah, of course. So story has a huge impact on those focus topic. Of course, this should somehow be everything aligned. The story should be told by the reports I have, but it should be a short story. It should not be like a novel with 300 pages.
Just moving on, we've spoken a lot about sort of the different types of metrics that people have, the number of data sources that are growing, but are there any sort of things that you see in the industry that people really need to be focusing on over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, and whether that's going to have an impact on how they find that sort of single source of truth?
Another tricky one. To keep it short, yes, of course, there may be quite a lot of things which have a huge impact, but I would say at the moment, there are a lot of possibly hot topics for the next month or maybe 1 or 2 years. Maybe one thing in general, it's like all the changes in the area of data protection or privacy it's already present, and I think it will continue to have a major impact on all that stuff around data, around tooling, around reporting, whatever comes along with that. But beside that, yeah, also because of my daily work, I would maybe see the following 3 ones as very important. I cannot guarantee this becomes the most hot topics in the next 18 months, but for us or for my daily life, they are very important. First one, no surprise here, it's AI. Of course, the impact is already there and it will grow. I think we are all on the same side if we say this will become a hot topic. Maybe it is already the hottest topic at the moment and this will stay like this. I think it's interesting because it's already there and it's not only ChatGPT, there are way more things you can do when it comes to AI. And in terms of data, it can be a huge benefit if you use it wisely and correctly. For instance, analyzing huge amounts of data within seconds to identify those patterns or trends I mentioned before, you cannot do this manually. It's absolutely not doable, and AI can help you a lot. We are running tests already with some of our clients, and well, it's still testing, but quite surprising results, to be honest. Yeah. Another one is for me personally very important, everything around customer experience. It's a huge topic, wide area. But at the end, that's also what we notice day by day, all the companies are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of having a great customer experience, not only a positive one, it needs to be great or higher level because customers are expecting a decent experience provided by the brands they are interacting with. And only by using technologies you can really survive in this field. Can be a chatbot, can be virtual assistants, can be data platforms or any other tools. And everything together will help you to not only to identify the right customers, but of course to create this experience they are demanding at some point. And you have to play this customer experience game, otherwise you will not survive on a long-term perspective, probably. Hard words, I know, but I see it every day. So that's what we see. And yeah, maybe more generic one is omni-channel marketing. We see that customers interact with more and more channels, having so many more touch points, of course, generating also tons of data every day. And all this needs to be harmonized, managed, analyzed, everything under one umbrella in the best case. Of course, it's an own discipline. You can use a lot of different tools, getting all those stuff done. But you need to commit to this topic. If you're a company in this, and you need to commit to do omnichannel marketing, not only to talk about it. And this is what I would say. It needs this commitment. All of the 3 different topics, you can talk about all of them like hours, but at the end, you need to decide, is it really important for my own business? And then you need a commitment and then go for it.
And then analyze the data on how things are impacted as well, surely.
Right.
And then just to finish off, this is a question that we ask all of our guests. Is there any advice that you would like to have given to your younger self starting in your career, or anyone perhaps that's starting in the data world at all?
Could be many probably, but especially when thinking of data, I mentioned before, like it's already 20 years ago when I started. A lot of things which are like normal for us today were not present at this time. So my advice to myself earlier times would be use way more automated tool support if possible, even though if Excel is a great tool, but it requests a lot of time, and I think I've spent far too many hours doing manual work and writing some formulas to at the end have no results because it was wrong.
It's funny you say that. We did some research last year that found that 40% of data analysts still say that manual data wrangling is their biggest challenge. So I don't think we've moved the needle too much yet.
Don't get me wrong, Excel is a great tool. I love it, but it has its limits at some point. And yeah.
Johannes, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll get you back on to talk about some of those other areas that we discussed as well.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure for me. Thanks, JJ.